When a greedy son betrays the woman who gave him everything, chasing wealth at any cost, fate strikes back with a cruel twist. In a quiet town stood a modest home where Eleanor, a hard-working widow, raised her only son Adrian. She sacrificed endlessly, sewing clothes late into the night, skipping meals so he could eat, and dreaming of a better future for him. But Adrian, now in his 20s, felt suffocated by poverty. He craved more money, more power, more recognition. While his mother cherished values of love and honesty, Adrian despised their simplicity. He believed that loyalty to family was weakness, and he often rolled his eyes when Eleanor spoke of integrity. Deep inside, Eleanor sensed the cold distance growing, but she dismissed it as youthful rebellion. Yet the seeds of betrayal had already taken root in Adrian's heart. Adrian began frequenting the city, where wealthy men in tailored suits and polished shoes spoke of fortunes and investments. Their words seduced him, and soon he despised his mother's humble home. He looked at Eleanor not as a parent, but as an obstacle, someone holding him back from wealth. One evening when Eleanor mentioned her small savings account, his ears perked up. She had quietly set aside money for emergencies, intending to leave something for him when she was gone. For Adrian, it was not a safety net, it was a golden opportunity. The whispers of greed in his mind grew louder, drowning out his mother's voice of care and sacrifice. To access Eleanor's savings, Adrian fabricated a story. He told her he had found a promising business deal, a chance to invest in a company that would multiply their money. He painted a picture of prosperity where Eleanor could finally rest from her years of labor. With eyes full of trust, she believed him. She handed over her savings with trembling hands, whispering, "Don't forget, my son, this is everything I've worked for." Adrian embraced her, hiding his smirk. That night, Eleanor prayed for his success, while Adrian celebrated the first step in his betrayal. With the stolen money, Adrian joined circles of wealth and deception. He dressed in suits, drank in lavish bars, and boasted about his business ventures. Yet beneath the glittering lights, wolves lurked. A group of fraudsters noticed Adrian's arrogance and naivety. They flattered him, calling him sharp and ambitious while plotting to use him. To them, he was not a partner but prey. Blinded by greed and pride, Adrian welcomed their friendship, never questioning their motives. He believed he had finally escaped the shadow of his mother's modest life, unaware that he was building his empire on quicksand. Back at home, Eleanor felt a gnawing unease. Though Adrian sent occasional letters claiming success, something about his tone felt hollow. She remembered the warmth in his childhood eyes, now replaced by cold ambition. She tried to ignore the worry, convincing herself that maybe this was his path. But some nights she sat by the window with tears in her eyes, whispering, "Please don't lose yourself, Adrian." Her heart carried the weight of a truth she dared not face, that her son's love for her had already faded. Adrian's business partners introduced him to fake deals. They staged meetings, showed him forged contracts, and convinced him to invest more. Hungry for higher returns, Adrian poured all of Eleanor's savings into their schemes. He envisioned himself as a future tycoon, imagining Eleanor living in luxury, not because he cared for her, but because her comfort would fuel his pride. He believed he was too clever to be deceived, yet he was walking straight into a trap. Every coin he handed over brought the fraudsters closer to their ultimate betrayal. Months passed, and Eleanor's letters went unanswered. When she traveled to the city to visit Adrian, he brushed her aside, embarrassed by her simple clothes. "Mother, not here, not now," he hissed, worried his wealthy friends would mock him. Eleanor's heart broke, but she said nothing. She left quietly, clutching her worn shawl, realizing that the boy she raised with love was now a stranger. The bond of mother and son was unraveling thread by thread, replaced by cold indifference. Adrian, intoxicated by his rising social status, started borrowing money to maintain his image. Luxury cars, fine wine, extravagant parties, everything became a performance. People admired his facade, but behind closed doors, cracks appeared. He often dreamt of Eleanor, but her image no longer evoked warmth, it evoked shame. He convinced himself that once he struck it big, he would return to her, not with apologies, but with wealth. In his twisted mind, money would heal every wound. The fraudsters struck their final blow. One morning, Adrian discovered that the company he invested in had vanished. Offices were emptied, numbers disconnected, and partners disappeared. His accounts were drained, leaving him with nothing. Panic gripped him. But worse still, the authorities soon arrived. The fraudsters had used his name on forged documents, making him the scapegoat for their crimes. Adrian realized too late that his arrogance had blinded him to the obvious. His mother's entire savings were gone, and now his freedom was at risk. News of Adrian's downfall reached Eleanor. She sat in silence, the truth sinking in. Her life's work, her sacrifices, and her son's trust, all shattered. Yet her grief was not for the money, but for Adrian himself. "What have they done to you, my son?" she wept. Though deep down she knew the betrayal was his own choice, she visited him in prison where he sat broken and ashamed, but even then he struggled to look into her eyes. The cold-hearted son had finally met the weight of his betrayal. Life behind bars stripped Adrian of his arrogance. The luxury he once flaunted was replaced by gray walls and iron gates. Fellow inmates mocked his business skills, calling him a fool who lost everything. Each day was a mirror forcing him to confront his choices. He began to realize that his thirst for wealth had destroyed the only true treasure he had, his mother's love. But repentance came too late, for the world outside had already moved on. Despite her pain, Eleanor continued to visit him. She brought food, books, and words of comfort. When others told her to abandon him, she replied, "A mother's love does not vanish even when the child strays." Yet every visit drained her spirit. She watched her son age faster behind bars, his eyes hollow, his shoulders heavy. She forgave him, but forgiveness could not erase the scars left on her heart. Upon his release years later, Adrian found the world unrecognizable. His old friends avoided him. His name carried shame, and opportunities vanished at every door. He returned to his mother's home, but it no longer felt like his. The walls whispered of betrayal, and the air carried her silent disappointment. Though Eleanor welcomed him back, the warmth that once defined their bond had grown cold. Adrian lived each day haunted by what he had done. He replayed the moment he took his mother's savings, the look in her eyes, and the trust he had shattered. Wealth no longer mattered. All he wanted was a second chance to undo his mistakes. But life rarely grants such mercy. He worked odd jobs, earning barely enough to survive, a cruel echo of the humble life he once despised. One day Eleanor fell ill. Adrian sat by her bedside, holding her frail hand, tears streaming down his face. "Mother, forgive me," he whispered. She smiled weakly and replied, "I forgave you long ago, my son, but you must forgive yourself." Her words struck him deeply. Though her health declined, she remained a beacon of compassion, reminding him of the love he had thrown away. Eleanor passed away quietly one morning, leaving Adrian alone in the modest home. Her death broke him completely. He realized he had not only lost her savings but the years he could have cherished with her. Standing at her grave, he wept uncontrollably, whispering promises to be a better man, though he knew she could no longer hear them. The cold-hearted son was left with nothing but memories and regret. Haunted by guilt, Adrian withdrew from society. He avoided gatherings, unable to face the stares of those who remembered his fall. Nights were the hardest, as dreams of Eleanor's forgiving eyes tormented him. He often woke in sweat, feeling the heavy chains of his past. Redemption seemed impossible, yet he clung to the hope that living humbly could honor her memory in some way. Adrian spent the rest of his days warning others about greed. He spoke to young men about the dangers of chasing quick wealth, urging them not to abandon their families for illusions. Some listened, others mocked him, but he persisted. His words carried weight because they came from scars, not wisdom alone. He had learned the lesson too late, but perhaps he could prevent others from repeating his fate. When Adrian died years later, his life was a quiet one, marked by solitude and whispers of regret. There was no wealth, no empire, no glory, only the memory of a mother who loved him unconditionally, and a betrayal that defined his path. His story lived on, not as a tale of success, but as a warning of how greed can devour even the strongest bonds of love. The tale of Adrian and Eleanor is a reminder that betrayal never ends in triumph. Money can vanish, reputations can crumble, but the wounds we inflict on those who love us most can last forever. A son who chose wealth over his mother lost everything: his fortune, his freedom, and his soul. The world remembers not his rise, but his fall. If there is one lesson to take away, it is this: true wealth lies not in riches, but in loyalty, love, and integrity. If you found this story powerful and thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, where every tale carries a lesson, and every fall has a truth to reveal.